Right. Hello, good morning, and welcome to Coffee, Buses and Politics. D'Artagnan is away, so you've just got the three musketeers. Stephen should be back next week, so it's Alex, Martin and I. A few things to go through this morning: elections, bus franchising, the leader of the opposition in Cambridgeshire and the county budget. We're going to be going through it at a bit of a pace because I think we've all got to shoot off pretty promptly. How are you both?
I am approaching the period in the electoral cycle where I'm increasingly more tired every single week. So yes, it's 3 months until the elections, and the elections are indeed going ahead in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And I have to say, I thought like this was quite clear to everyone, but I still meet people who think it's not going ahead. And I'm obviously trying to inform people the best I can. I was canvassing the other week, and someone was quite upset, saying, well, but the government cancelled all the elections. And I was like, actually we're having the elections in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough for county and the mayor, and trying to explain that the areas that don't have the elections, it's because they're in this like first wave of local government reorganization, and that's why there's an argument it doesn't make sense to have an election this year just to have a new election on perhaps different boundaries and obviously different councils just the year after. So yeah, mixed views on that. I think obviously you can say that like, well, you need to keep the electoral cycle every 4 years on county councils, but from a cost and logistical perspective, if you're going to change the councils next year, it's probably best to elect straight to the unitary authorities. But clearly not everyone has the same view, and that's fine. But for us, it's easy because they're going ahead. What will happen after, in terms of like when local government will be reorganized, when we'll have elections for the shadow authority, and then the new unitary councils. I don't know. What we know that is that May is going ahead.
Yeah, I don't know whether. Sorry, I missed the end. Sorry about that. Almost the second you pressed go live, my internet went down for a few seconds. But I don't think they will have to have elections for a shadow authority. I think they will appoint a shadow authority.
Yeah.
That's certainly how it has been in the past. While which is the aim of that is basically to get things going so that the council, when it's elected, can get off to a running start. So that it's getting everything sorted. There'll be consultations with all sort of leaders and existing councillors and everything else in the middle of that. But there'll be a shadow authority that, or two shadow authorities in Cambridgeshire potentially. But there'll be something appointed effectively to get things going.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be like an easier option. Although I did see, I forgot where I saw it, but there was like one of the various letters and communications from central government saying, well, like once there's a proposal for the area, the government will support the local councils to arrange elections as soon as possible. But I didn't really understand whether they want to elect on a shadow authority or appoint and then elect on the new council.
Traditionally, shadow authorities are created, in readiness for the new council coming in. It just means that you can sort of, as I said, you get off to a running start effectively. And it's, I've sort of seen a few of them around. In fact, there was one of the reasons why I've forgotten his name now. How soon you forget? Former mayor of Cambridge, of Birmingham, Andy Street.
Yeah.
One of the reasons there was a really, really good, solid authority had been set up, shadow authority set up in Birmingham before Andy came to power, and that's one of the reasons he was able to get off and get up and running so quickly.
I mean, there is a thing, of course, around here we don't actually know what the what the boundaries are going to be.
Mm.
No, and my understanding is there are still three possible options on the table, and to me, it's about splitting Cambridgeshire in half and then just deciding which half belongs to Peterborough and which half belongs to Cambridge. Is the truth, and I can see where people would want to go to that, and my gut instinct is Huntingdon needs splitting in half, but and if I was Huntingdon, I would be fighting like crazy to belong to Cambridge. But if it's split into two without splitting any authorities in half, I sadly think Huntingdon will end up with Peterborough, because it doesn't make sense to have places like Yaxley belonging to a Cambridge authority. That's the way I see it.
It would be very interesting from like the point of view of like the government's relationship with the local authority, because I mean there is of course the preferred scenario of all the different authorities, let's say in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, all the districts and the county agreeing on one proposal to go to government, which I think is very unlikely to happen. But then there's also like the question about like what happens if one authority within itself can't agree? What happens if the county council can't agree on a proposal that all the different partners of the joint administration actually, or like anything that you have like a majority agreement to? And I think those are questions I still don't have clarity on. I can see how the government consulting being like, okay, please send us a proposal, and how the process works if one proposal comes through, rather than individual councils sending 3 or 4 different proposals to government.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, and somewhere along the line, Angela Rayner's got to make a decision on it, and it's going to be difficult because I mean, we saw yesterday from the Grenfell thing. When you make a decision without consulting, it comes undone. And one of the issues is going to be, what about public consultation in all of this? And if 2 proposals go up to government, Angela Rayner makes a decision, and there's no public consultation. It puts her in a bit of a spot, because she's trying to get things done quickly, and is and taking a bit of heat for not doing public consultation properly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tension here between wanting to get things. The government sees local government reform rightly as important, because the current system is slow and clunky and all the rest of it. We know that, and so wants to get it done quickly.
Yeah,
there's always a tension between doing it quickly and doing it right. And I understand the imperative to do it quickly, and I'm not sure we've got the headspace as a country at the moment to do something like what's it called, Redcliffe Board. But I kind of think that something a bit more, there are going to be unresolved issues as a result of this, but then there are always going to be. But I think the big one is trying to do things within existing boundaries is actually going to cause issues. And this is the Peterborough thing, that actually the sensible, a council centred on Peterborough wouldn't have Peterborough in the corner. It would include parts of Lincolnshire and Northampton and so on. So I think that there's an issue there. But as soon as you do that, where you're bringing in bits of, say, 4 different authorities, that makes it much more complicated. So
yeah, it is. And the thing about not splitting, somewhere along the line, the best way of doing this would be to have some sort of boundary commission that decides it. But the trouble is, it would take forever, and we know one of the things in this country is we take forever to do everything, and we need to learn to be quicker, and we need to learn to make decisions, and people have to accept that change sometimes happens, and sometimes change is uncomfortable, and we. Politicians have got to put that message across a little bit. It doesn't mean that change is bad. It means it's uncomfortable, because it does create uncertainty. But a lot of those uncertainties don't prove valid often. and that's about electing politicians to make decisions. And yes, let's consult with the public. Let's ask them, what they think. Let's get their views, but not as by way of a referendum based on the number of people that say yes or no, but because you want to make sure everything is thought through before a decision is made.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I agree. I do agree. And it's the thing we've said before. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Peterborough thing, I think it's very, very valid that you would sit Peterborough in the middle of something, especially if, the thing that I would most like to see is a focus on travel to work, because then, you're thinking around public transport and stuff like that is right. And public transport is absolutely critical to this, especially as the way we're going with something else we're going to talk about today with bus franchising and the like. Getting all this right and getting people to and from work, to and from school, and to and from places of leisure. If you think about travel to work, in our sense, a lot of people in Whittlesea, where I live, work in and around Peterborough. It's also the place where people are going for their leisure. And you'd say the same for those people where they're commuting into Cambridge.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. So like I'm also like for the argument of like splitting Huntingdonshire, because you can make the argument that like, people in, St. Ives, for example, are more likely to go into Cambridge to work or use the busway to go into Cambridge for like various activities, or like stay within that like more southern area, compared to people in Whittlesea who are more linked to Peterborough. So yeah, I mean, and even Huntingdon, I mean, I've been to Peterborough many times for campaigning, but I will never like actually think, well, I'm going for an evening out in Peterborough. I'll be like, well, I'm going into Cambridge. It's just a more natural like thought that you have, I think, when you.
We'll have to sort that.
I'm always happy to travel, but I think you get what I mean. It's like it's not like kind of like the natural like thought of a lot of people. You look on the map and it's like, well, to get into Cambridge.
Peterborough's a really nice place for a night out. It's got lots of little micro pubs and stuff like that around, and a new place called The Shed that's just opened. It's got charters. It's a really nice place for a walk round and a few beers.
Yeah. Well, the next Coffee, Bushes and Politics outing will have to be there. However you're getting for your night out, we'd like to get there by bus, and hopefully that took a step closer yesterday, because the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority Board recommended that Nick Johnson, the mayor, adopt a bus franchising scheme, and went through, nobody voting against. I think there were a couple of abstentions, but that is now Nick is to make a decision on bus franchising.
Yeah, and almost certainly Nick will make a decision that supports bus franchising, and good on him. And I watched the debate yesterday, and it was just to clarify, there was one abstention, and which was East Cambs, and Fenland, the leader of Fenland, didn't vote because basically because he's got a conflict of interest, because he's a trustee of FACT, a Fenland Association for Community Transport. It's a bit of an odd one, because knowing that vote was taking place and knowing how important it is, there is a question about could he have sent a deputy that wasn't conflicted. I mean, he could have sent Steve Tierney. Let's not go there. But could he have sent somebody that wasn't conflicted? And I would argue he probably should have done, given how important it is. But that's his call, and they didn't step in the way of it. And East Cambs' position was more about the fact that they felt that it wasn't the right model to consult on, and they should have consulted on a wider principle about franchising. But actually, it was pointed out that the government guidance, which was written by the Conservatives, required them to consult on a franchising model and on enhanced partnership. which is what they did. And the reality is, there was also an argument to say it needs to be deferred until after the mayoral election, and I'm never a fan of that anyway. And there's a reality around that, which was, there's a big majority in favour of bus franchising, 2/3 in favour, just about. We just need to get on and get it done. So I would urge Nick to put his signature to whatever he needs to do.
Okay, and also,
his executive order, and go ahead with it.
I mean, the other thing is, I wonder how much difference there would be between the franchising schemes that the general public could usefully comment on. Because remember, there were two parts of the consultation. There was one for for everyone, and one for specific organizations. And I think if you're a bus company, you are going to know more about the details of running buses than than me. So that I think the principle of franchising and the principle of a sort of an amount of sort of local control.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's interesting, and this is where those people that want a deferment, although I don't support a deferment, I can see the argument, because in order to get out of it, now we're sort of going down that process. There has to be a reconsultation, effectively, and it's quite difficult to do. But as I said, just about 2/3 majority in favour. Let's get it done. And let's let the mayors during this campaign argue about what they want to achieve with bus franchising, rather than about bus franchising good or bad. Because if he deferred it, Nick's open to criticism as well. And to be fair to him, with his election campaign, he can stand up and say, I'm the mayor that delivered this. And people that know and understand buses have been crying out for it for a long time. I have.
Yeah, definitely. But and I think also delaying it, I think it's actually good that it's very difficult to undo, because if everything was very easy to undo after you've been through often years and years of consultation and lots of spending a lot of public money in the process, and you can easily undo all the decisions, then that's how we end up not doing anything really or very little long term, because then you change the administration every 4 years, and every 4 years there's a risk and a real possibility the politics of it will change. And then people rightly ask, why hasn't anything changed in the last 8 years on buses or whatever it might be? Because you can undo decisions according to your political priorities, in that sense.
I've just realised I've spilled coffee down the jumper. High quality stuff, this. So yeah, I agree with that, and it's one of the issues with politics, and it it's going to be very, very difficult for a mayor to come in now and say we're not doing this. I think for two reasons. One, because hopefully Nick will have signed up to say we are going to do it, but secondly, because there's such a strong percentage of the public actually in favour of it. But also actually because we are starting to see, and we have seen, real progress in bus provisioning in Cambridgeshire. And there was a criticism made of one of the criticisms of Nick is that he's seen as the mayor that's done buses, and it's almost like people pointing to that and saying they've done nothing else. That's not true. But in reality, he's done something important that 2/3 of the public support, and most councillors support. As I said, I watched a debate with West Northants about their desire to be part of a combined authority, and one of the reasons for it was bus franchising, and they were pointing at what's happening in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The fact that I don't think West Northants have found a home yet for a combined authority, I think, is another issue, but certainly that was mentioned in the debate.
Yeah, and I think that's something that actually, if you are to take a decision now, it's actually something that can be delivered, not necessarily to the fullest extent, because in Manchester it did take a long time to actually have the full system as it is at the moment. But visibly you can deliver lots of things within a 4-year cycle. If I went in and said, okay, I want to cancel all this, undo all this franchising business because I want light rail, the likelihood of me to be able to deliver something that's tangible at my end of the 4 years as mayor is extremely difficult given the financial considerations of that and all the processes that are involved. So I think it's very easy to say like, no, I actually don't think this is the right solution because I want, like, let's say, light rail instead, without perhaps considering how challenging it will be to deliver light rail in 4 years and actually show something for it.
No, I agree, and it's going to take the next 4 years, I think, to make it happen as well. And I suspect to make it happen properly.
I mean, the merits of light rail aside, that's a longer project anyway. But it's all the light rail and buses aren't mutually exclusive. Indeed, I think there's room for both. The other thing is, given I don't think we can wait, or we shouldn't wait to improve public transport in Cambs, particularly with the amount of growth in housing. I'm gonna go back to the example I keep bringing up of Huntingdon, because hey, that's where I live. If we get the new housing that's we've got some coming just to the west of Huntingdon and a lot proposed over there, the other side of the A141. If everybody there is getting in their cars to go into town and back, the ring road is going to be awful. Now, I know that's only one example, which is the getting around within a town, and there's a really important piece for getting into Huntingdon from the outlying villages and so on, where there's also going to be growth. But though that has to happen as the housing comes, otherwise we are going to be getting ourselves in real.
Yeah, I've got to be careful here because obviously I'm representing a client on that bit. One, but I mean, there's a principle also about how you design new estates to make sure that they're as bus friendly as possible as well, and also how you design and think bus routes so that those new estates work for buses. It's absolutely critical that you do that because part of the business model, but it's a 30-year model to be fair, is to double bus usage. And if you're going to do that, you need to make buses something that works for people.
And just one thing, the I think what's quite important is that we're not, and this is everywhere, this isn't just here, is that we're not forcing people onto buses, we're not forcing people out of cars. It's giving people realistic options so that you don't have to take a car, and actually jumping on your bike or taking the bus is actually the better option. And you don't and again, this isn't going to be everyone, but this is the classic one for me, and I suspect you, Martin, is you want to be able to go out, have a few beers, and then get the bus home.
No, 100%. That is when I use a bus, it's either because I'm going into London to have a few beers, or I'm going to a gig, and I get the bus into Peterborough before I get the train down. Yeah. Or I'm going into Peterborough, and I'll catch the late bus back. Absolutely, as an alternative to a fit 14 quid taxi. That's the reality. But I quite enjoy buses as well. I can sit there and chill a little bit, and whatever. But it is about making them work. So if you've got long buses that form part of a long commuting route, you've got to do like they've done on the guided bus and make sure they've got Wi-Fi, make sure they've got comfortable seats. Potentially on buses that like some of the I think some of the buses that run from some of the park and rides have got tables, where you've got 4 people around a table. It's that sort of stuff. So you've got to make buses work. How are you going to make and enable people to take bikes on buses?
That's an interesting one.
All of those things. If you could design a bus that could take 6 or 7 bikes at a back or something like that, especially around Cambridge, you could make a difference. People that live in the centre of Cambridge could get a bus out to somewhere near the Gogmagog Hills, go for a little bit of a cycle ride, and catch the bus back in. Without having to navigate Cambridge, because a lot of people don't like cycling in Cambridge.
But equally, part of that is because there's so much motor traffic.
Yeah. And the ambition is it's not a stated ambition to constrain people from using cars. It's an ambition to make buses work so well that people don't need to use cars, and don't want to use cars. And it's effectively trying to achieve something that a lot of cities have achieved.
Can I just rate one other thing, which you might, because I'm aware we need to press on in a minute, because I think, Alex, you've got to go soon. There seems to, given that the mayor, this decision had to go to the transport board and then the whole combined authority board, and then to Nick to make a decision. That seems like a lot of bureaucracy. Or am I missing something?
No, I was also wondering like why the process takes so long, because I was actually reading a comment like on one of the bus franchising stories being like, well, why did it take 4 years even to go to this stage? And then you have to be like, well, like there were other issues to focus on and sort out in the first years, and until you get to the point that you do the consultation and so on, there's so many stages to go through. So it's not something you can do. I think some people imagine like, the mayor having obviously this executive power and can come in like on year one and actually say, we're going to franchise, without thinking there are like so many steps before that decision.
Yeah, first of all, I like mayoral decisions. I wish we had more of them, to be honest. Is a reality. I like individual accountability, because one of the things that politicians are great at is using committees and outcomes of committees and stuff to twist the way and they don't lie, but what they do is twist reality, and they use the committee systems and structures and the fact that people don't understand them to do it. And I like the executive authority thing. I think it's right that he consults. He's also been to a scrutiny committee as well, remember?
But there's
a lot.
So I understand that you consult, absolutely, and I understand it takes time to develop the proposals, and I can, but does it really need to go through 3 steps internally?
I think you could argue it doesn't, is the truth, but it's also true you can't argue that it hasn't been through the mill a little bit in terms of scrutiny and examination. So there's that benefit to it, but I agree with you. I as somebody that does public consultation for a living, I think we should consult less often and do it better. It is a reality. Something like this, consult on it, make a decision, go for it, and then in 3 or 4 years' time, reconsult. How is this working for you? And so you can tweak and make it right.
I agree, and I also think like even if you kept like the various layers of scrutiny, which I think like having scrutiny, especially when you have the different authorities that are represented in the combined authority, the various district representatives and so on, is good to have that level of like local input as well. But you can make the time frame much more tighter. You can say, well, we're going to have like the consultation for like whatever the I don't know how many like months you have to have it for, like in this circumstance, but like the 6 weeks that you have, and then you can say like we're going to have those meetings straight after this, and obviously allow enough time to like read the results and so on. But I feel a lot of consultations, until you have the results, until you get through all the stages, it takes over a year, when you could realistically have like a 6 months timetable for decision making once the results are out, and once you can actually analyze them and produce the paper a bit quicker.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a bit of guidance coming in on consultation, and I would agree with this. Just to say exactly, about how consultation isn't necessarily the thing, though. I mean, it partly is. We do sort of consult to death on some things, but some of it is how politicians use consultation, and one of the things is, and I've done it a bit here today by saying, 2/3 of the people are in favour of it. That's only half the story. Somewhere in the middle of all that is a load of suggestions and comments and thoughts, and it's for politicians to go through that and make sure that where they can and where it's appropriate, that thinking has been considered, and the end result reflects it. But consultation isn't a referendum, and that's consultation on anything, including my world, which is planning. I'm just developing with somebody a planning training package for councillors, and it's one of the things in there about evidence-based decisions. Your evidence is not 300 people have said they don't like this, because your evidence is, this is what 300 people have said. This is our analysis of what that means for this planning project in terms of evidence and the decision I'm making. They've said, there's not enough school places. The evidence behind that is this development is going to provide a school, or land set aside for a school, or whatever. And that's what that's what you need to use consultation for, and not suggest that it's a referendum. And I hold my hand up. I've done it here today, but you don't get many consultations where you've got 2/3 of people in favour of it.
Yeah. Just a quick point from Ryan. The 905 used to have space for the coach under the coaches of bikes, as well as aircon and Wi-Fi. Now I remember when I lived in St Neots, they had a loo as well. I don't know. I'm thinking of the wrong one. The one from St Neots to Cambridge used to have a loo on it. Although I'm not sure I ever would have wanted to use it, but it was there. Shall we move on? So the other thing we've got bus franchising. We also had a visitor to Cambridgeshire.
I suspect we had more than one visitor to Cambridgeshire, to be fair, but I think you're on about Kemi Badenoch.
No, I was talking about a redneck phalarope. No, I wish I'd seen a redneck phalarope, but I didn't.
What?
It's a bird. It's a redneck phalarope is a bird that I would very much like to see one day.
Okay.
That's one of the ones that's on my bucket list. But no, I think we're talking about Kemi Badenoch.
We are. She was in Stilton yesterday, obviously promoting Paul Bristow's campaign, but also in a town that it's represented as currently a county council by Simon Bywater, who is obviously a Hunts councillor as well as a county councillor, and an all-round nice guy. I have a lot of time for Simon, but yeah, and Kemi Badenoch has obviously seen there's potential for Paul to win, and she's in here and promoting somebody that she hopefully in May can see as a success story. I'm not convinced, increasingly not convinced, looking at the polls, that that's going to be the case, but I can see why she's out there promoting it and doing her best.
I mean, I think from on the one hand, you can argue that like having like very high level visits, like the leader of the opposition in your area, means that you might be actually worried, because then when you're kind of trying to pull in the target resources and actually have like, shadow ministers and leaders, it's either because you're like very comfortable winning and you want to like highlight this and like do a lot of activity with, the top table people, or you actually think you do need that kind of like support to say like, look, I got the shadow minister here, or like I got the leader of the opposition here, and actually because you're actually concerned about the results.
But you also know, if Kemi Badenoch came and she did a visit, and she was out there in public shaking hands and all that stuff, first of all, some people will notice it, and that's quite important.
Yeah,
it will get media, and that's quite important. It will get loads and loads of social media coverage as well, and that's important. But the other part of this, and you guys know this, a politician comes and does that, they're also sitting around with people in a room somewhere in private and talking them through, this is where we're going, guys, this is our election campaign, let's get out there and do it, and that sort of stuff. And so you're getting those background briefings as well. And that's helpful because it helps you sort of plan your campaign a little bit so that you're compatible with effectively with head office. All that stuff's important too. And from a morale perspective, it's good as well. So the Conservatives will be rightfully sort of chuffed that that's happened. It would also be a bit surprising if senior Conservatives weren't popping into Paul's campaign. If they see it as a winnable seat, and if they see the county council as something that they can take control of again, you will see a lot of them. I'm not sure the county council is going to work, by the way, but and I have concerns about what the county council is going to look like post-May. But we've got elections happening, which is a good thing. I think, although I'm not critical of the decision to defer some of them, but I think it's, it is good news for the Conservatives. They will be chuffed about it, and let's see if it has an impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think with both the mayoralty and the county council, I think I'd be interested to know what you both think. The dynamics are similar in that a lot of it depends on. Well, actually, no, they're not quite the same. For what do Reform do? Do they stand? What do the Greens do? And then how many Conservatives go to Reform, and also Labour go to Reform? And for the mayoralty, and in some parts, some county divisions, do people vote tactically to keep the Conservatives out? But equally, people might be voting tactically to keep Labour out.
No, absolutely. Bearing in mind the cycle changes and changed last year, and the cycle does change, and we've seen that quite dramatically. Labour became relatively unpopular very, very, very quickly, and I sort of feel for them in that, because it's made it really difficult to deliver. But Cambridgeshire, Reform will be delighted that people are saying this, but the reality about the outcome at the county council and the outcome of the mayoral election, in my view, is all going to be about how well Reform do and where their votes come from. And what I fear for with the county council elections is, so in 2013, when we were in a similar point in the cycle when UKIP were on a real high, the outcome of the county council elections was no overall control. But that no overall control was such that it was impossible for anybody to form any sort of coalition against the Conservatives that worked, because people weren't willing to work with UKIP to form any sort of alliance. And that's how I became leader in no overall control. The last county council elections, there was a balance where you could sit and look at it and go, actually, we've got the possibility of putting together a coalition of a rainbow coalition that keeps the Conservatives out of power. That's a valid thing to do, and it's what happens overseas and in other places that have got PR all the time. And it has meant Labour, the Lib Dems, Independents, all these people have had to work together to make Cambridgeshire to move Cambridgeshire forwards. And political parties working together has got to be a good thing. But what might happen this year, sorry, I'm ranting a little bit, but what might happen this year is Reform do so well and people will be unwilling to work with them that it will become impossible to put anything together that is practical and workable for the county council. And that's a real fear I have. And the other option is the Conservatives and Reform working together. And I have to be honest with you, I absolutely dread the idea of that.
I think it's actually really likely to be a no overall control. That's my view, and that's why I'm really, really annoyed seeing the Lib Dem leaflet circulating recently, saying, and I quote, it says a clear choice for Cambridgeshire this year. So basically the same, obviously narrative about bad things with the Conservatives, or better future with local Lib Dems. No other outcome is possible. Well, of course it is possible. First of all, we have a joint administration now, so clearly it's possible. A no overall control is possible. There are other outcomes that are possible. So stop misleading the public.
Was there a dodgy bar chart in there?
Yeah, because they use the 22 and 23 seats, Tory and Lib Dem seats, right? Without and it's really misleading, because if I'm in Cambridge, one of the Labour seats in Cambridge that has a big, let's say Romsey, for example, which is a big Labour majority, then the likelihood of the Lib Dems taking that seat is extremely minimal. And obviously, if you receive something like this, you're like, wait a second, it's like, it's a Labour Green area or whatever it is. It's not like a Tory Lib Dem area here. So yeah, it's other outcomes are possible.
There's a reality, which is historically places like Cambridge City, Reform never do well, or their equivalents. UKIP never did well. Their predecessors, Referendum Party, never did well. And neither did the BNP, to be true. In fact, the BNP didn't do well across Cambridgeshire. South Cambs, Reform have never, UKIP never did well there either. It was basically mostly it was Huntingdon and Fenland where UKIP found traction, and I suspect it's going to be the same again. And that means that. The element is how much traction are they going to find in Fenland and Hunt. That's the reality. But and because of that, there are huge numbers of unknowns about what the county council is going to look like. You could sit and look at 4 or 5 potential scenarios, not least because we've still got 3 months until the election, just about.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm at the stage, and having done lots of campaigning, I can't feel I can predict the outcome, and I think the no overall control is very likely as well. So that's why I'm really, when I see no other outcome is possible on the leaflet, I'm like, of course there is.
I think no overall control is it's almost inevitable. But it's what no overall control looks like, and who could, and whether there's a deal to be done that pulls together something that is workable for Cambridgeshire is the important thing.
What happens if you can't? They can't. You can't. Does there have to be who chooses the leader? It's a vote of all the councillors.
Yeah.
And what happens if nobody can get anybody through?
Then I don't know the answer to that, and it's interesting. I know with budgets, that there are things you can do if you can't set a budget as a council, which they were nearly at about 6 years ago, I think, where they managed to swing right at the last minute one of the UKIP councillors to vote with the administration to get the budget through. The answer is I don't know. If it was at a national level, you'd have another general election.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happens either. I guess if you can't, if politically it's very difficult, the political party split, you may want to propose an independent councillor leader to be a uniting figure. If you can't agree which party should have the leader of the council, I don't know what will happen, but then it kind of depends if there are actual non-aligned independents that exist and they are elected rather than independents that are aligned with one particular side or the other. So it's difficult. You can generally have a non-aligned independent that would be a good leader in the absence of political agreement, but
so the only bit I've got here is in the event of there being ECP council. That's not is it? So apparently the chief executive takes on the executive functions if he can't appoint the leader, but you obviously can't do that for 4 years, can you?
Yeah.
For a year if you're electing by thirds. But 4 years. That's I can see that as can't see that as being practical. It'd be interesting to see where Cambridgeshire goes, but there are so many models, and as I said, I'm not convinced that it's all done and dusted yet because the national polls are changing, and it wouldn't surprise me if somebody's got something in the back pocket about one of the major parties that will make an impact during the campaign. And I think I include Reform at the moment as a major party, which I never did with UKIP.
I think you have to give them the support they've been getting in the polls.
Yeah.
Just as we're getting onto the budget there, should we just finish by saying, because I think the county council budget setting process is going on at the moment.
Yes, the budget meeting is on Tuesday. So if it's on Tuesday and Friday if you don't finish the debate on Tuesday. But if the debate finishes actually on Tuesday, then probably the next week's Coffee, Bus and Politics would be good to comment on how that went in full council. It's always very interesting meeting. I'm looking forward to see, if the opposition proposes any alternative, amendments, like any different proposal on the council tax, for example. I think we're finding out with the small amendments on Monday if there are any small amendments proposed. But the papers are out there on the county council website. You can have a read through them, and you can follow live the county council meeting from 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday.
I mean,
my guess is the opposition are going to push for no council tax rise or something between 0 and 4.9%, which I think is what's proposed. Given you've got East Cambs have gone for a 0% council tax rise, Fenland have got 0%. The difference obviously is social care. And social care makes a huge difference at the county council. But and to be fair, I take my hat off the statement that I saw from East Cambs about why they've gone for 0% council tax rise. I'm sometimes a little bit critical of these 0% council tax rises because they have a big impact on the council's ability to do business. And I'm going to cite Fenland for this. We can see Fenland having and really struggling financially at the moment. And when you think that Fenland is the most deprived, has the most deprived parts of Cambridgeshire in it, it desperately needs economic drive, and yet it's economic the department is responsible for economic growth and everything else has been absolutely cut to the bone, and that's not good for anybody. So I'm quite critical of Fenland and their 0% obsession, but with East Cambs, the statement that Anna Bailey put out justifying why they were going for 0%.
What did it say?
Basically, it was talking about the commercial arms that have been set up in East Cambs, and showing how they are managing to generate revenue for the council, which allows them to go for 0%. And it was actually quite good and well constructed, and it meant you could sit and look at it and say, actually, you can see where East Cambs has got with this, and where they've come to. I really can't with Fenland. We're seeing, as an example, in Fenland, a need for them to sell off land to basically fund necessary improvements to and capital improvements to leisure centres. As an example, and it's a race to the bottom as far as I'm concerned with Fenland and what they're doing. And as I say, two Conservative authorities both going for 0%, and you can look at the rationale for one, you can't for the other. If you really invested in economic development and you manage as a result of that to increase the number of jobs, drive up average wages in Fenland, that's a better option than 0% council tax rises.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult because it's like how much do you can you raise it by, from what level are you starting? It's difficult to do. I mean, I did see a thing with Fenland about they've got real problems with their leisure centres, I think, needing investment, and there's the figure you get to has to be, you have to consider against how you've got there and what where you're starting from and so on.
And Fenland are putting themselves in the same position that Peterborough did. It's exactly the same position. Peterborough went for low council tax, and then not long after Wayne became leader, they got into this position where they were effectively going bankrupt because of it. And and that wasn't Wayne's fault, by the way. That was what Wayne inherited as leader. And I remember chatting to Wayne a little bit about it because I did some radio stuff about it, and that's where you head to, with that not, because remember, if you go for 2 or 3% increase, rather than go right up to the 5, that 2 or 3% doesn't just apply for 1 year; it's forever, and so it has a cumulative effect on your revenue streams, and part of the reason why Finland is, in my opinion, such a poor council is because it has councillors that lack ambition, and it has councillors that are obsessing with keeping council tax low, and as a result of that, it's cut. And we've suffered enough of that over the last 15 years. It's the reality. Not to say it wasn't needed back in 2010. I think it was, but there comes a point when you go, actually, we're having a more of a negative impact than the benefits of keeping council tax increases at 0%.
Yeah. And the other thing is, particularly when inflation has been high, a 0% increase is a cut.
Yeah.
No, well, I've said this a little bit about Paul's election campaign, where he's talking about, I won't increase the mayor's precept during my period as mayor, if I'm elected. And the reality of that is that the mayor's precept is, my understanding, almost exclusively used for buses.
Mm.
So you then have to explain how you're going to manage, what is a turnaround in the fortune of buses in Cambridgeshire, because you're effectively creating, with it, because of inflation, a decreasing pot. That you can use for buses, and that means if you've got a decreasing pot, it means that we're back again into shrinking bus provision. Now, obviously, we've got franchising sat in the middle of that, but franchising is going to need investment.
Mm-hmm. Actually, just to go back on that, one of the I only caught part of the debate, but there was one of the things that came up, which is a depot strategy to make it easier for small companies or small and medium bus providers to enter the bus provision market in Cambridgeshire.
Mm.
And that means, it's like getting those depots set up. You can absolutely see the advantage, the competition, and so on, but for better service and and the rest of it. But you've got to, but it's setting those up. The bus franchising is going to cost money. This goes back to one of my things about one of the things why I'd be keen on more regional governments is that you end up robbing Peter to pay Paul a lot of the time. For instance, this is more with social care. People end up being put onto the NHS because the social care provision isn't there, or the people with the social care budget say that's expensive, and it ends up costing more for them to be looked after in the NHS, but that's someone else's budget, and that the sort of I do think that I'm increasingly interested in this idea of place-based budgeting, and that place-based budgeting can be at lots of different levels, because there is, as I've said before, it's one of my jokes. I've looked. There is no bag of money marked Huntingdon. It does not exist. There
is. It's a Huntingdon Town Council, but that's another matter. I sort of agree with you.
No, because that Huntingdon Town Council can't say, well, we want to spend more on. Actually, maybe we could, but generally, we want to put more money into dealing with potholes, or we want more potholes.
Well, they could, arguably, and similar. We've had stuff in the past where town councils, and I think in a couple of cases, parish councils have subsidised, as an example, either PCSOs, I think has happened in the past, or has subsidised funding for traffic wardens, as an example. So effectively you can, and you can do those things. But I personally, I'm a big fan of the reason I'm a fan of regional government is you effectively, it's about, I'm going to say it again, I think I've mentioned it in every one of these for the last 3 or 4 weeks, but Andy Burnham's book, Head North. Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham, sorry. Nick told me off for just saying Andy Burnham, and he's quite right. It's both of them. It's a really, really good read. If you're interested in, you can set aside some of the politics that's in there and everything else. Some of the politics is fantastic, by the way. The stories and what they tell about Hillsborough is amazing. But you know, he talks there about how the Westminster model fails, partly because of how it invests in projects, and it means the way the government invests in projects. And Wisbech suffers from this. It means that areas of deprivation, in order to deal with areas of deprivation, major projects will never get funded because they are there. That's not what they're there to do. They're there to generate income.
Yeah.
And so the reason I want regional government is so we can slash central government taxation, pass it to the regions, and the regions can then decide how and when to use it and be accountable through regional elections.
There's a story about Michael Gove when he was at Education, was having discussions about particular school playing fields.
Yeah,
that's just crazy. And I think one of the issues with West, I mean, I agree with you, and there's I think having Westminster doing less would be good, but also to focus more on what they are doing, because at the moment it feels that the amount that has to get through Whitehall and Westminster and across ministers' desks is impossible, and decisions don't you get this thing with, for instance, with to get effectively with civil parking enforcement, to get traffic wardens in Huntingdonshire requires a ministerial sign-off. That's really weird.
I think that's ridiculous. And also, like with other like highways related matters, like, if you want to do like a ban on pavement parking, I think it's also linked to national legislation. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but things like civil parking enforcement, like, the pavement parking bans in London, for example, go through some sort of like national decision making. So I think all of this stuff should be local.
But if you think about the best example for me is the A47, and there's a campaign, and it still goes on to get the A47 dualled right the way along its length. And there's a reality, which is a regional government could make that happen because of the benefits to the region and everything else. But because it's a national government decision, because it's a trunk road, effectively, what you're having to do is get a ministerial sign off for something like that. And it's competing with a lot of other projects and a lot of other funding. And I just feel like that's better done, and that debate is better to happen at a regional level. There's something about, this is where I'm uneasy about the combined authorities, because it's being seen, the increase in the number of combined authorities, it's being seen as the end game, and it can't be, because the combined authorities are still mostly, although some of the model's going to change, only able to deliver based on two things: the mayoral precept, which is minimal, and the amount of money they can squeeze from government. And although that pot might increase, it's still down to whether the Treasury say yes or no. It makes absolutely no sense for us to be that centralised.
But this thing, you want it. You obviously a regional government, local authority wants to invest in its area because it wants the area to improve, but also has to be able to afford that investment. And so it needs to get it as an organisation needs to get some of the financial benefit back from that, so that it can afford to do it autonomously. Yeah.
By the way, we've got Neil Halliday making a number of comments today, and they're quite long comments, so they're a bit difficult to cut and paste, but quite interesting. So I would say to you, Neil, just make your comments a bit shorter. We can cut and paste them then, because some of them are really good.
There's a shorter one.
Okay, yeah, make them a bit shorter than that. Yeah.
I mean, it's. I think we're probably wrapping up now, because I've actually got to disappear as well. If anybody's in town, I'm minding shop mobility today, so do come and say hello. Bring coffee. Because I haven't had one yet. Sorry. Can you tell I didn't get much sleep last night? I was I was trying to finish some work until too late, and then I couldn't get to sleep.
I
Anyway.
I always man up with 2 coffees when I'm doing this. Is the truth.
A very good idea. I usually have one start with wine, and at some point in the live stream, I have to refill it.
Am I allowed to say man up anymore? Is that allowed?
Well, I mean, say what you want. I have to say, my wife says, oh, you just, and not necessarily to me, you've got to man up. I actually kind of have I don't think it's a great thing, because you've got the whole, men being tough, stoic thing, which I think is a problem. But I think we know what's meant, and I think it's I think it's when it's said as a sort of tongue in cheek, rather than you need to man up and lift some heavy things and fight a bear.
Yeah, but I've got a copy of the Gruffalo behind me, so does that show my other side?
What, that at weekends you are in fact the Gruffalo?
My granddaughter would be absolutely over the moon with that.
Yeah,
I think it's fine. We're not bringing the EDI discussion. I think others are doing the work on the culture war themselves.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching this episode of EDI Woke and Political Correctness. Thank you everybody. We'll be back next week to talk more about coffee buses and politics. Thank you all for joining us, and well, take care. Have a good weekend.
See you next week.
Cheers all. See ya.